Is that deposit you put down really non-refundable? I'm Andrew Ayers. I'm a lawyer who works with families and business owners to protect their legacies through planning. In the next few minutes, I'm going to teach you about how the pandemic has affected our non-refundable deposits. Now, I remember years ago when I got married, the first thing we had to do was put down a deposit with the caterer, with the event space, with the photographer, with everyone who seemed to be there on our big day had to have some kind of a deposit. If we went back and looked at many of those contracts, they were non-refundable deposits. So if my wife and I had called off the wedding or something else had happened, that the wedding didn't happen, we weren't getting the money back. Now, as you probably know, in the last year or so, things have changed. Many people had deposits on weddings and other events that were to occur during 2020, but were canceled through no fault of anybody due to the COVID pandemic. So the question I get quite frequently now is, what do I do with that non-refundable deposit? If you're a business owner, should you be keeping the deposits or should you be returning them? If you're the person who gave the deposit, are you able to even get it back? And the answer really lies in the contract that you signed with that vendor. Many contracts were written prior to the pandemic and don't have any kind of provision for the return of a deposit. However, I think if the last 15 or 16 months have taught us anything, it's that it may be a good idea to have a force majeure clause, meaning a cancellation due to events beyond anybody's control. As a business owner, this ends up being a better business practice. It's one thing to have somebody cancel on you the day before their wedding because they found a better provider. It's something very different to have somebody not be able to have their wedding because the pandemic has shut down all the event halls and there's nowhere to have the guests and the ceremony and the wedding. What I want you to understand, and the most important thing, is that courts are no longer looking at non-refundable deposits the same way after the pandemic. It used to be we'd look at the contract and go by the language of the contract. Now there's a lot more wiggle room, especially for events that are canceled by something like a global pandemic. Now there's going to be two ways for you to get your contract right if you're a business owner. First way is just trial and error. You can put whatever provision you want into your contract and hope that you can keep the money and nobody will complain. Option two is it's a lot easier not to reinvent the wheel, and instead you can work with someone who does this for a living, drafting contracts. You can create provisions that allow for you to keep your deposits in certain circumstances, but be able to refund part or all of the deposit to somebody if it gets canceled for something that's out of everyone's control. One thing you'll want to also consider is how much work you have to put in before an event. If this is something or an event where you have to do a lot of research and you put in a lot of time, then the refund probably won't be the full amount. However, if all you're doing is keeping an open day on your calendar and you're just going to show up and do something on that day, then chances are these days, if a court looks at it, you may be told to return the entire deposit. So if you're ready to get started, if you want to get that contract looked at, make sure that your deposit provisions are correct and are going to have the best result for you and your customers. Now, you remember you want your customers to have a good experience as well. Go to andrewmayers.com and click on the Schedule a Consultation button, and you'll be taken to my calendar to set up a legal strategy session. We'd all like to keep those deposits if we can as business owners, but the fact is, the last 16 months have taught us that there may be circumstances where you may have to return those deposits.